Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Morris Singer. I'm the founder and chair of Primary Care Progress. I'm a general internist by training in the family medicine department at Oregon Health and Science University. It's great to be with you today. This is being recorded in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's why my hair looks the way it does. I'm also recording this, you might notice, in a closet because that's where the best acoustics are in my house right now. I've got a 1-year-old downstairs who's screaming his head off. So hopefully you cannot hear that in the background. Um, okay, so today our goal is to take a look at teams in healthcare and beyond from a variety of different perspectives. And we're going to start by focusing on the characteristics of high performing teams. And then we're going to take a look at the developmental stages that teams pass through as they inevitably evolve over time with an example from my own life of what that looks like. So there's never been a more important time, I think, to really consider fostering teamwork. We have an unprecedented amount of work on our individual and collective plates. That work is complex, so no one person can know or do everything. And there's a tremendous amount of learning and iteration that needs to happen at both the individual and the collective level. So to be successful, we think a team needs to have some basic characteristics. One of them is this concept of interdependence, which basically means that we have to rely on each other, on our team, in order to achieve our goal. Now, this is different from a group of people working towards a common goal, but doing so from within their own swim lanes. So here's the thing. For a lot of people who call themselves teams in healthcare, when you look under the hood, what you ultimately end up seeing are groups of people working towards a common goal, but they're working within their own swim lanes. They're doing the work maybe for the same patient, but they're not coordinating, they're not collaborating, they're not asking for help or readily providing help. And that's really what primary care practice felt like for me about a decade ago when I first started. For far too many things that the patient needed, I would respond, I'll handle that. Whether that was medication reconciliation, communicating important information to the patient and their families, med refills, care coordination, et cetera, et cetera. And how do you think that all worked for me, for the patient, for their care, and for other members of our team? It didn't work well. Work piled up on my plate. I was getting overwhelmed. Stuff was falling through the cracks. Patient was not getting the care that they needed, and other members of our care team were sidelined. So our team increasingly became interdependent, right? The pharmacist started taking the lead on managing the patient's diabetes and their meds. The social worker started taking the lead on behavioral health. And I've started focusing more of my time on the complex medical issues. And our team regularly talked, we compared notes, we shifted our work and our focus as needed to fill in the gaps. And so we ultimately ended up becoming interdependent. And so I want to ask you to think for a minute about your own team. Is it interdependent? Or is it really a lot of lone rangers sticking to their own swim lanes? And as you consider that, think about what would it look like and feel like to become increasingly interdependent on your teams, whether they're in healthcare or health or in another aspect of your life. That's interdependence. So other characteristics of high-performing teams, both inside and outside healthcare, are some of the following. So there's difference and diversity on the team. So a whole host of skills and perspectives and experience, a comprehensive repertoire that we can draw on. And high-performing teams not only have that difference, but they celebrate it and they harness it, but they also manage the inevitable tension that comes from that difference. High-performing teams also have shared power. They have a flattened hierarchy so that team members have a say in goals and plans. However, there is structure. High-performing teams have structure. They have clear delineation of roles, of norms, of processes, And those norms, roles, and processes are constantly being updated as needed in a shared manner. There's trustfulness on those teams. People assume best intentions about others. And they also feel that they can be themselves in the space of the team, share their ideas, share their concerns, share their unique lines of sight without fear of embarrassment or punishment. And finally, there's a growth mindset on high-performing teams. Folks view themselves and the team as a work in progress, constantly looking for opportunities to learn and grow. And that's it. That's your high-performing team. Sounds easy, right? It's not. It's hard. Teamwork, takes a lot of work. It really does. And you'll notice from the previous list that there's the technical work that we must do and the relational work. So the technical work includes structures and strategies and the processes, and the relational work refers to the trustfulness, the personal growth, the flattening the hierarchy. And those two buckets require us to mobilize a different set of muscles as leaders on these teams, the technical and structural muscles, but also the relational and the emotional muscles. So it's a group of Stanford researchers led by someone named Sarah Singer, who looked at different primary care practices across the country. And they looked at them from two lenses, this relational lens and this technical lens. And what they found was that the lowest performing practices did neither the technical or the relational well, whereas the vast majority of practices were somewhere in the middle, right? They were doing mostly technical work, right? The processes, the strategies, the workflows, etc. And they were maybe doing a little bit of relational work. And overall, these practices were doing just okay. They had a lot of burnout. In some ways, they were successful, but they were kind of in the middle. But what the researchers found was that the highest performing groups who were most successful and had the happiest staff, they were doing both. They were doing both the relational and the technical. They were doing the package. So what does that mean for us as leaders, right? What compass heading should we set for ourselves as we manage teams? Well, we think at Primary Care Progress that our goal is to maximize the success and satisfaction, right? Success is how we do, right? It's the revenue, it's the services that we provide, it's the concrete difference that we're making in the world. Whereas satisfaction is how we feel, whether employees feel respected, valued, heard, leveraged, whether they're proud of their work when they go home every day. And it turns out that how we feel as team members today determines how we do success tomorrow. So our job as leaders is to focus on both of these. And relational leadership, in many ways, is about giving you the tools and the lenses for doing that. So now let's turn to the work of teaming, right? And you'll notice that it's an active word because it's constant, right? It's not a noun. Team is not static. It's a verb. It's action. It's what we're doing in service of optimizing how this group of people works together. Okay, so there are a few ways to look at the process of teaming and teamwork. Now, one is functional. That's what's right in front of you. So in this case, teams come together to create a goal. They make a plan. They build a team. Then they go off individually or in subgroups to execute a portion of the plan. Right? Then they come back together again and make decisions about the work that the individuals and the subgroups have done, solve any problems that have come up, and plan the next steps, and then they disperse again. Right? And this pattern of coming together and dispersing repeats like an accordion until the project is complete, the event is held, what have you. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't find this functional view of teams incredibly helpful because it focuses on stuff that we can all see, right? It's all above the surface. But a lot of the issues that make teams successful and satisfied or not are occurring below the surface, right? And that's where we want to put our focus, below the surface. So let's put on our snorkels and go under the surface. Come on, you got to help me out with my pandemic joke, all right? Thank you, one person in New Jersey. All right, so we want to focus under the surface. So that's why we lean on this framework for thinking about teams called the Tuckman's Stages of Team Development. Now, it was developed by a person named Bruce Tuckman, an educational psychologist at Ohio State, who developed this framework of the developmental stages that teams inevitably pass through as they evolve over time. And just like with humans, these stages involve skills that that team has acquired or not, unique challenges that they're likely facing, and ideas for helping them navigate those challenges and moving forward. And what they found is that just like with humans, teams need to pass through an awkward stage of tumult and tension and angst before they can become fully functional teams. Just like a human needs to pass through adolescence. You can't bypass it. And I don't know about you, but my adolescence was an absolute show. What was yours like? Now, lucky for all of us, the stages of this framework rhyme, so it helps us actually remember it, as you can see. So let's go into the stages. We'll skirt the tops of the waves, and then we'll go a little bit deeper. So every team must initially form, come together, come up with rules of the road. But then what eventually happens is they start storming. Tensions develop based upon difference. If they're able to surface them, they then go into norming, where they come up with new rules for the road, how they're going to go about their work. That enables them to start performing like a well-oiled machine, right? They're rocking and rolling. And then at a certain point, they hit a transition moment and they transform and possibly even adjourn. Now, note, I think it's actually adjourn, but whatever, potato, potato, it's got a rhyme. So let's actually dive into this in a little bit more detail. So forming, right? The team comes together, right? Maybe for the first time. There's excitement about the possibilities. Folks are on their best behavior, right? Differences are kept in check, right? Below the surface, people are trying to put their best foot forward, and the energy is high. But then it's time to storm, right? And this is when there's a dip in energy. It's the awkward phase, because what's happening is reality is setting in, right? Different expectations about the work and the roles. And there's friction because many people on the team might like to do things differently than our colleagues, right? So there might be struggles about the vision, struggles about power, right? Who makes decisions and how? Certain groups might feel disincluded or disrespected. So satisfaction takes a hit. Now, all that tension and difference on the team presents an opportunity for norming if we can raise it to the surface. We have to raise those tensions to the surface and start talking about it, right? We have to air our concerns. And making decisions about how we're going to go forward, the new rules of the road, that is what norming is, right? We come up with processes that feel better to everyone. And this raises not only the likelihood of success through better workflows, but also it raises the likelihood of better satisfaction. Because in the process of norming, different members of the team feel heard, they feel valued, they feel respected, with their ideas influencing the collective effort. So this then enables us as a team to move into the performing stage, right? We're starting to operate like a well-oiled machine. We're learning at the individual and collective level as previous energies that were, like I said, previously focused on anxiety and tension and what is my role and am I respected? All of that now is directed towards work and learning. So success rises, satisfaction does too. And when we do happen upon a challenge in the performing stage, we've got a set of approaches to resolve it, as well as the confidence that we can do so. We've developed that muscle as a team. So performing is where the group is really rocking and rolling. And then we get to, like we talked about, a transition, right? That's transforming. Maybe the work is complete. Maybe the team shifts and we lose somebody or gain somebody. Maybe there's a major crisis that occurs and it overwhelms our previous ability to use tools that we've developed to handle it. So we deal, or sometimes we adjourn, right, and go our separate ways. Or like I said, if enough people on the team turn over, we actually have to go all the way back to forming. Turns out if 50% of your team is new, you got to go back to a start, and you don't get to collect 200. Come on, help me out, people. Now, a few major points about this developmental framework. Unfortunately, you are most likely on a team in healthcare that is not performing. If you're like the rest of us, you're most likely on a team that is storming and attempting to norm. So here's how you know. If you or other colleagues on your team spend a lot of time confused about your roles, unclear on the vision, right, dissatisfied with relationships and dynamics on the team, power, you are storming by definition. And you are only able to get out of that if you effectively surface those tensions and discuss them and come up with a new set of rules of the road. So most of us are not performing. And what that tells you is there's incredible potential for improvement in healthcare if more of us can start norming and get ourselves to perform. Second concept, most teams in healthcare do not take the time to form. They just dive into the work. Right? You've been on teams like that, right? You come together and the meeting is kicked off, and what's the work? What are we going to do? And people on the table, they don't even know who each other is, right? They don't even know where one another is from. So we need to take more time to form. Third, most teams in healthcare also do not take the time to adjourn, right? They mostly just move on when the work is done. And that can be dissatisfying or traumatic to team members, especially people who have higher five dynamics, excite energy. Not taking the time to adjourn and develop closure also robs us of the ability to make sense of what we did together and harvest the learning at the individual and collective level, right? Insights about how we work as individuals, as a team, how to go about projects to achieve both success and satisfaction. Those gifts we can take to our next team or project if we actually take the time to talk about them. So if you like this lens for teamwork, there are a lot of different strategies for how you optimize your work according to this framework. So there are things that you can do to prevent your teams from going off the rails, and then there are things that you can do to intervene when things inevitably do go off the rails. So anything that you and your team can do to form is going to help out immeasurably, right? Taking the time to form, going slow to go fast, taking the time to form is going to mean that you're going to storm less frequently. When you do storm, you're going to be able to norm, and that storm is going to be less severe. So anything that you do to get to know other people on their team, narrative work where you hear people's stories and your values, five dynamics as a tool to understand how people learn, work, and collaborate, all of that stuff is going to help you form, and it's going to help surface inevitable tensions and enable you to circumvent them proactively. Secondly, anything you do to create psychological safety on your team is going to help prevent storming. Because what it does is psychological safety creates an environment where you can air concerns and differences. You can talk about stuff you're seeing without fear of punishment or embarrassment, and that's going to help you surface problems that are arising. And finally, anything you can do to develop problem solving and process skills at the individual and collective level is going to help you in your storming. It's going to help you elicit new ideas. It's going to help you come up with new workflows in a way that feels fair to folks, where their voices are being heard. So I'd like to share an example of what this looks like in real life so you can get a sense of how does Tuckman's play out in reality. So the Relational Leadership Institute was launched about 4 years ago. And many of you know Brian Park For those of you that don't, he's one of the co-founders of the Relational Leadership Institute. He's an amazing family clinician, deeply dedicated to health, fairness, and justice. He's visionary. He's highly relational, incredibly empathetic, and he's hilarious. His 5D profiles shows that he's very high in Explore and also very high in Examine. So Brian and I partnered up about 4 years ago to launch the Relational Leadership Institute. And I'm a general internist. I'm also, like Brian, focused on the big picture. I have a lot of Explore energy. However, I also have very high Execute energy. I like to get shit done. And I have very reserved Examine energy. Not a lot going on there. Okay, so we launch Relational Leadership Institute. We come up with this exciting vision. We set about doing the work, which basically at that point involved hundreds of conversations, right? Constant iteration, right? We were making it up as we went along. And our work was like an accordion in a lot of ways, right? We come together, compare notes with each other, brainstorm, make decisions, and then we go off and do stuff, right? It was exciting. We were making progress. People in programs were buying into the vision. But then the storm started happening, right? Tension started developing between Brian and I based upon our differences, right? So, for example, I'm a shoot from the hip sort of person, right? I make decisions on the fly, even before we've discussed it. So I ask this group to join the Relational Leadership Institute. I ask this other group to provide a sponsorship. They ask for a special type of deal. I say, no problem, we can do that. And then I come back and I tell Brian, and he's like, you agreed to what? And this is frustrating Brian, right? Because I was doing a lot of stuff without discussing with him. I was shooting from the hip. Now, on the other hand, for me, our meetings were starting to slow down a significant amount to my great frustration, because Brian's high Examine energy, right, was forcing him to look at the details, the data. That could take a lot of time, right? And he was also okay having these meetings where we brainstorm for hours, but we wouldn't make any decisions. And that drove me crazy, right? He'd be like, let's continue making sense of this. And I'd be like, we're not walking out that door, right, until we decide who's doing what and when it's going to be done by. So there was tension between us, right? And so eventually we had to surface that tension. We had to talk about it. And we had to come up with a new set of rules for the road. And what helped us in doing that? Well, number one, 5 dynamics helped us, because we could immediately see how our energy tendencies were playing out, right? Our narrative work was incredibly helpful, right? The fact that we'd spent time telling each other the story of our lives and the story of things we were hoping to do, right? And I understood, from Brian's stories, why community justice work was so important to him and why that had to be a key piece of the puzzle. And he understood from my stories where my impatience came from, right? My desire to just get some program out there started, because we're going to have to iterate, right? And so we might as well start somewhere, right? That had been my experience with starting every program in my life. And so we began norming together. Right? We came up with a new set of rules for the road, right? How we were going to make decisions, how we're going to communicate with others, right? What our meetings would look like. And coming up with those rules started enhancing both our success and our satisfaction. But I got to tell you, then something happened. We recruited more people onto our team. We recruited a medical student named Kelsey Priest. We recruited a nurse practitioner, a teacher educator named Teresa Turnbull. We recruited another family doc named Marcel. And each of them brought amazing skills, amazing networks, new capacity to do work, but they also brought difference, right? And so the tension came back again, right? We started storming again, and it required us to norm again. And that slowed us down, right, from doing the actual work. But taking the time to once again form and norm after we storm enabled us to come up with the successful MO that was going to enable that team to do great work. And once again, we turned into a well-oiled machine. And then it was time for us to transform, right? 2 years into this work, I had to step back. We needed to formalize the program. We needed to develop paid positions. For some on our team, that meant it was time to step in and step up. And for others, it meant it was time to step back a little bit. So what we did at that point was we took the time to transform and really adjourn, right? We took the time to debrief and develop closure. Celebrate what we'd done, what we'd learned, and honor one another's contributions. And some of that closure took place as a group, dinners at my house and Kelsey's house, etc. And some of it happened one-on-one. And I got to tell you, those moments of closure were a gift to each of us because it helped each of us understand the impact that we are having on others on the team. I mean, think about it. How many of you have been given explicit feedback from colleagues on the unique contribution that you make to a team, not to just the work, but to the teamwork? The impact that you have on people's satisfaction, their feeling of belonging, their feeling that they can share what's on their mind, their feeling that their contributions are seen, valued, and heard. Most of us have never received explicit feedback on how we show up on our teams. And when we do and can take it in, that information is a gift to our future team and our future work. And as leaders, I think we need to foster the space where folks get access to those insights. And you're going to be doing that later on in the Relational Leadership Institute program. So when you have a chance, I'd like to ask you to think about the team that you're currently on. What developmental stage are you in? If you're like most, you're probably in storming. So what are the tensions, right, that are above the surface, seen? And what are some of the tensions on that team that are below the surface? And what things might you do or say to surface those tensions and help that team norm and move forward? I'd love you to consider some of those things. So I hope this framework has been helpful to you in the teams that you're on and the teams that you're going to be on. You know, at Primary Care Progress, I think we really believe that we're on a journey of teamwork and leadership and community. And each of us is learning how to be the best teams that we can be. And it's ongoing, it's iterative. We're all learning how to do this, especially now that so many of our teams are virtual. And I can't stress enough how important it is to build your muscles in teamwork. The work that we have before us is colossal in size, tremendous in importance, and we cannot do it on our own. And let's be clear. We are seeing a lot of examples right now of leaders and team members in healthcare and outside of healthcare taking less than ideal approaches to teamwork, right? We're seeing teams where there's a complete focus on the technical aspects of work without a focus on engagement and support of people. We're seeing teams where whole groups of people are being left out or subjected to dehumanizing experiences or injustice. On the other hand, we are seeing teams where well-intentioned folks are attempting to address past or present injustice, but they're creating environments on those teams that are divisive, that are bullying, that are totalitarian, and that stifle open discussion and engagement by all. We must find a better way to move forward as teams. We must create more ideal teams and team spaces. And I think we do that by leveraging all these insights that we have about humans, what makes them tick, how to set them up for success at the individual and the collective level. And I think above all, we need to be relational and help others do the same. So thank you for your time. I wish you well and good luck on your journey and the rest of your program. And I am signing off if I can figure out how to do it.